Hi, 3D MJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Jeff Alberts and Eric Helms as we talk about when to quit as a physique or strength athlete. While most content on the internet is about how to get motivated or how to commit yourself in the long term, this week's podcast focuses on the flip side of that. Nothing is forever, but some things can definitely be cut short or taken too far if you're not paying attention to the right things. So Eric, Jeff, and myself go over the common make it or break it points of the many athletes that we've dealt with year after year. We talk about Jeff's multiple retirements as a bodybuilder, the times that we have all quit our own competition seasons early, and why we think some people are able to maintain lifetime careers as athletes while others cannot. So if you've ever wondered how much longer you can last, or even whether or not this whole getting on stage thing is for you, I really think you'll get a lot out of this episode. So without further ado, here is Knowing When to Quit with Jeff Alberts and Eric Helms. Jeff, in like the, I don't know how many bazillions of competitions that you've done, how many times going into a show where you're like, this is the last one? How many times?
I think it's always right after it's over. I always say I'm done. I'm retired. I think I said I've retired like probably 10 times already.
How long does that last?
Until I'm probably fat and happy again. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I can do this.
Until he forgets.
It's always when I'm like at the tail end of it, when you're just like on the last leg and your body fat levels are low and you're really hungry and you're tired physically and mentally. So it's always like, yeah, okay, after it's over with, like, oh, that's it, I'm done, I'm retired. And I remember my ex saying, you said that last time.
The first season that you said that, though, it was your second competitive season, right? Because you're like 3 shows, time off, 3 shows, and then, hey, I'm going to quit now.
Yeah, for 3 years in a row, I did shows.
Right.
I think it was after the third one, maybe. Can't remember. It's been so long ago.
Long ago that I retired, and now I'm prepping again.
I would say, like, in 2014, I think I might have been starting to talk about it, like, this might be the last time. And then I even thought about it this time around, but I'm not even saying it this time. I'm just like, we'll just see. In my mind, I'm thinking, we'll see if I'm still having fun at the end. And I'm better at not making decisions when I'm in that, like, at the tail end, because I know, like, that's not fully me.
Right.
So I like to give myself some time to kind of like, okay, let me get my bearings again, and then where I'm clear-headed, then I can make a better decision whether or not I'm still enjoying it or not. Because of course, like right now that I'm fat and happy, I'm like, yeah, prep's not that bad right now. I'm enjoying it. You know, a month before a show, I might be going, oh gosh, this is a chore now, where it might not appear to be as fun in the moment, but that's just temporary feelings.
Right. And do you think that you say you're going to quit because it's like difficult, or because you feel like I am now in my 40s, it's about that time?
I think now it's like I definitely know I'm getting closer to the genetic ceiling, as far as my potential. So I think in my mind I'm like, okay, I'll be done when I know I can't progress anymore.
Okay.
So, and that might mean I might have to do one season where I don't look as good as I used to really kind of get a full understanding of that, because you won't know unless that happens. So I know some people, like, you know, like a Jordan, they're like, okay, the winning shot, they win the championship, okay, I'm done. I'm going to sail off into the sunset. But as time rolled on, he came back.
Yeah.
And then when he came back, you knew for certain, okay, yeah, he's not as good as he used to be. So it's kind of like, I think that's probably how I'll approach it, is like I'll just go until I can't improve anymore. And when that's solidified, then I'll be like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to be the guy who's like hanging on for 5 years, just doing it to do it, you know, to have fun. I want to be able to be competitive. I've had this discussion with my brother too, just recently, because he just competed in, you know, he's 50 years old.
Right.
So it's kind of similar for him. We both kind of laugh about it. We say, okay, whenever we, you know, our glutes look pretty like wrinkly and droopy, we're done.
Damn it.
The droopy glutes.
The telltale
That's the
sign.
marker. That's retirement sign right there. The droopy glutes.
Damn it. I feel like I had those my last prep, though. That's the sad part. They deflate
But, I mean,
so quick. They deflate so quick on me. It's bullshit.
Right? But when you look at the sport now, it's kind of evolving. Like with the older guys, they're getting, I think with the more knowledge that we've gotten over the last few years, you're seeing older guys lasting longer and still improving. Maybe not muscle mass wise, but like conditioning levels, presentation, posing, that type of thing. And then you see them having fun still. So it's like, okay, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it another 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Helms, with all the athletes that you've coached, have you ever had this talk with someone, not because of age or because like, okay, I'm passing my peak, but like, when people come to you and they're like, hey, I don't think this is for me anymore. Like, what are have you had that?
Many times.
Okay. Tell me how that typically goes for you.
Well, I don't know how it typically goes.
I would say that was a loaded, open-ended question. Is it usually, like, is there a general trend in like the cause of that type of stuff?
I think I can break it into some categories. There's
Okay.
I'm going to try it for my first time, see how this is. I did that, I'm not going to do it again situation, which
Right.
is in people who think they want to compete and don't. That's a relatively common reason. And then I would say there's the people who just don't feel like they're getting out of it what they wanted anymore, or that the cost is not worth it. And they're maybe later in their career. And I have definitely worked with some older guys who have decided, this is painful, hard, and I'm not in, like, while I like the process of lifting and looking good, it's not fun for me to get on stage looking worse than I did previously. I've had a few competitors retire who are masters too. I've had a handful of people who started and thought they wanted to bodybuild and didn't. And I think in the end, it's the same reason, just different angles. It's when it becomes not worth it anymore for them, when whatever you're trying to get out of it is not worth the cost, or what you're getting out of it is not what you really want. So I think it's pretty individual, but it's also true that most competitive bodybuilders are highly driven by progress. I mean, Jeff's a great example. He just said that he would most likely retire if he knew for sure he couldn't keep improving. And I don't think that would be an uncommon sentiment. I think most of us who love the iron game and love lifting and even love competitive bodybuilding, we love progress, and we'll hopefully keep doing it even though we can't progress. It's not like we're just going to stop lifting weights when we're 52 or something like that.
Right.
But I could see that not being enough to actually get through the process of putting on the posing trunks, I try to put myself in Jeff's shoes, which is difficult, but I think maybe if I was like a legend and I had been competing a long time, and even though if I was like at 95% of what I used to be, and someone was like, hey, will you do a guest posing for us? I would actually be more motivated to do a guest posing than I would to actually compete at that stage, because it would more like be an honor of my career. Like, hey, this is, Dave Gooden. He hasn't, he's just coming back to do a, guest posing thing. He's the, most money won in the WNBF. He's a legend, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But I would find it tough to motivate myself to compete if I was no longer even competitive myself, because then why compete? I think I would just try to do what I could in the gym and enjoy it and do it for different reasons. But I've also had people who were the cost to their family or life or their mental health with their ability to balance bodybuilding is just never quite gets there. People who struggle with disordered eating long term, or who just really tend to suffer mentally and emotionally throughout the diet. That's not incredibly common, but it's definitely happened. Even in some veterans I've experienced who really just never quite make the cost of bodybuilding not worth it long term. Like each season they get a little more depleted, instead of it getting slightly easier, which is hopefully what happens, with people who stay in the sport long term. That's not been their experience, and that's not a knock against them. It's just, it's a pretty damn hard sport, So I have had some people who have stepped away. It's tough to know if they've stepped away permanently, but
that's what I was going to bring up. Is like it's strange to me that that someone, because of how long it takes to make any type of, I would say, some measurable and some physical, like visual progress in the sport, because it takes such immense amounts of time. I can't foresee a time where I would be like, I'm never doing that again. Because like I could do this in 15 years from now and look better than I do now. Like be better. Yep. It would actually, my chances of being better in 15 years are way better than next year. And so that's why it's always like, for someone who's done it multiple times, like say they've been trying to compete 1 to 3 seasons in the last 5 to 10 years, so they obviously like it. I couldn't imagine them saying like never again. I would think just that they would know at that point, not for a while.
Yeah, I think it's just the way people's personalities work, and also the time at which they make the decision, like Jeff said. Like that's something we've talked about before, but we've all repeated this multiple times that, you know, you try to avoid making important life decisions when you're in a very dieted state, because it's just not a accurate reflection of how you're going to feel in a month, you know. Sometimes not even an accurate reflection of how you feel tomorrow, you know.
Yeah. I remember Berto and I have had this conversation a lot in the last like few years, but I started dating Brandon, and for you listeners, he's like 6 years younger than me, when I was in the middle of my 2013 prep. And Berto will always tell me, he's like, I thought you were joking. I thought you were just prep crazy. But we like him now. I was like, thanks, Bert. He was like, whatever she needs to do to get through it, that's okay. We'll bring him along. And that one actually stuck. But it was funny because he was like, I thought it was just a prep decision, but all right, my man's older than I thought. I was like, yeah, he's more mature than I am.
I almost quit a personal training job a year before I actually ended up quitting it during my 2009 season, because they were just pissing me off at the time. I didn't have the energy to deal with it. Yeah. And my wife and Berto and others were like, so what are you going to do? And I was like, well, we can just start the 3D muscle journey thing early. And it's like, what do you mean? Start it early. It's going to take us years to even make money. Like, what are you talking about?
That's prep brain.
Yeah.
What else have y'all jacked up in your prep brain? I mean, I don't think I've made anything like super crazy, but I think I just ruined a lot of friend relationships my first couple years because I couldn't go out anywhere. Like I couldn't do public very well for a while. But I don't think there are any like major decisions where I was like, ooh, like jobs or breakups.
No, I fortunately saved myself from the major decisions.
Same, Jeff?
Yeah, I didn't quit my job or anything like that, or even said I was going to quit my job, but
but people do.
But I did make prep priority. Yeah.
We definitely have to.
Actually, back on Andrea's question about people who basically thinking they have a crystal ball, like I'm definitely done for forever, even though they're relatively young. Jeff, when you retired in 2006, did you think you're ever going to come back?
That was actually one point where I was actually content with not competing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was coming off of an emotional year in 2005 because my mom passed away.
Right.
So that was like the most devastating thing I've ever experienced in my life, was losing her. And then 2006 was like dedicating that season to her. And at that point in 2006, that was like the leanest I ever got. And I did almost won an overall at an NPC show. So I was coming off of that with a lot of emotions and a lot of like feeling very satisfied with that. And I was like, okay, I'm done. So basically, over the next year or two, I was pretty content with just lifting weights and just living out my life and kind of like just enjoying the lifting. And it wasn't until like the end of 2008 where I was kind of getting that competitive fire again. Like still felt unfulfilled in the sense that I never like attained that pro card, and that I didn't really go through my prep in a fun way. It was always like just too much competitiveness and wanting to win and not really truly enjoying the journey. So just like that kind of coming back in 2009, it was like just trying to fulfill like that enjoyment of the sport. So that whole mentality of 2009 was more about, okay, I'm gonna do this season to have fun. I'm gonna really open myself to meet people and actually have fun with them backstage versus like being closed down and being competitive. And yeah, and sure as shit, I win 2 pro cards and we formed this team. So yeah, I think I could have probably retired in 2009 and been satisfied with that, but I was just having too much fun. I mean, now I have Eric and Berto and Brad to share it with. I was like, okay, this is actually a lot of fun. And even I did have fun at times with my brother competing with him.
Yeah.
But it's just there was still some voids there. But I'd say, yeah, after 2006, that was like probably the one time where I said I'm retired. Like, actually meant it. But as time went on, I just kind of got that fire going again.
And that's interesting to me because I think the key point there is that you had a pretty significant mindset shift as to the why that you were competing. And I have run into a lot of people. Actually, Jeff and I just recently got an email about this. This guy was very few short weeks out from competing, and he was questioning whether he should even do it because he wanted to make sure he got a certain placing or higher. And we both said the same thing. We said, like, look, if that's going to be your mentality, you're going to burn yourself out of the sport and quit. He responded very well. He kind of had a bit of an epiphany in the email, but just kind of understanding that, yeah, you might retire based on the mindset you have now if it's something that's not sustainable. But if you can shift your perspective to something where you're competing for more sustainable reasons, then you might not retire. So I think as personal growth happens in different directions, then obviously your choices will change too. And that's probably why that is why Jeff came back. So.
Yeah, and burnout prevention is huge.
I think my maturity level with the sport has gotten a lot better over the years. When I was so focused on trying for the placings, first place. I mean, let's face it, the sport is so subjective. You might be the best bodybuilder, let's say, on that day, and the judges, for some reason, don't see it that way.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna okay, I'm retiring based off of that. Like, okay, because I didn't win. I mean, you're gonna have that in the back of your head. It's gonna drive you insane. And to me, that's not retiring on a good note. You want to retire on a good note. At least I know for me, like I said earlier, it's like when I know I can't progress more, or let's just say in the dream world, I won a world championship or something like that Michael Jordan shot. Okay, I'm done. That would be like kind of the way to go out. Like when I know I can't progress anymore, and I'm just like on the very top, and I know I've reached my full potential. Okay, I'm good. But even like Eric said earlier about the like guest posing, because I did that last year.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even close to my best. I was probably like 70%. Like I was pretty off, and it was hard to get on stage like that. But I also really, like Eric said, it was more about, okay, I'm displaying, like, I didn't look at it as like, hey, I need to be like shredded on stage that day. Like the day after, a couple days after, in hindsight, I thought about it. I'm like, that's celebrating 30 years of work right there. So it's like, that's what I'm doing. I'm showing 30 years worth of work. And I had to actually make a speech after one of them. I'm like, oh, great, I got to make a speech on that.
I remember.
But it was just basically, I was just talking about, I remember like Eric said, I was watching Dave Gooden guest pose in 2000, and I was a competitor at that stage. And I just remember him, like, at some point, I want to get to where he's at. Not so much like winning world titles, but he's guest posing. Like, that's, to me, is such a pretty good honor. So I'm like, okay, so finally I got to that point, but it took it was 15 years later. So it's just basically just depositing one penny at a time until I got to that point.
Yeah.
So that to me was like, and there's less pressure too when you guest post because you're not competing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, it was more like, okay, I'm displaying my hard work, I'm displaying my physique, and I'm going to give this audience, I'm going to show them what posing's about. So it's more of like a show. So that was kind of fulfilling.
Yeah. Something I find interesting, though, that I know I did, and because I know the early beginnings of y'all's careers, I know you did as well. There's a lot of people, like you said, Eric, that like come in to see if this is for them, and they realize, okay, it's not. But I think I think there's a whole gang of people like us who like you do it once, and you're like, and I'm hooked. I need to do it again right now, like right now, as soon as possible. There's a couple athletes on my roster that did their first season and they're like, I want to go again next year. One of them, who is a fairly young kid, I was like, nah. But this other lady who's a master's athlete won her first show ever, when it's like, she's already pretty jacked, has a developed physique, because she played sports when she was younger. And it's like, okay, you actually could look good again, but then after that we have to take time off. But there was like, I remember my first show was in October in Oklahoma, and it was the last one in the state, and I was like, I'm doing this again the first show next year. Like, and like Jeff, you did your 3 years in a row, and I know Eric, you did your first 2 seasons in a row because you figured it out in between.
No, I went 7, 9, 11.
Okay, so you went
every other for 3 seasons.
Okay, yeah. But then it was like I couldn't stop for 3 years, and then I didn't think I was going to quit, but I was like, I have to figure out off season. And I think that's pretty much the same as the people that say like the cost isn't worth it anymore. Like I can look back and be like, I don't look that different after 3 years. And I don't know. I've just never thought of it though as I never would again.
Yeah, I think it's just it's different mentalities, and it's kind of, I think, knowing yourself.
Yeah.
Like I know for me, like the funny thing is, I've taken the longest stint of off competing out of all the coaches at this stage. It's been like 5 years, and it'll be 6 very soon.
Yeah.
But I've never said I'm retired. I'm always like, I've always planned to get back on stage, and for me, I definitely knew I was going to take, even if I hadn't started a PhD, I knew I was going to take a lot of time off after 2011, just because I had put so much energy into those 3 seasons. And like Jeff, my father passed in 2009, and there was never really like a stopping point for me mentally. Like I was gunning for the pro card in 2009, didn't get it, but got very close. So I was like, all right, 2010, I got to put on size. 2011, I'm going to get that pro card. So when I got it, my original plan was to do like 7 shows, and I was so done. Like we were going to do a show in 7 weeks, just all 4 of us together, all get on the same stage. And I literally couldn't motivate myself to diet for another 7 weeks. And I tried for about 2, and then I eventually told the guys, I was like, look, I don't know what it is. Like, I feel like I physically cannot keep dieting. I have 0 interest. I don't want to do it. I don't care about bodybuilding. I need a break, you know. I had just, so many years and so much energy of putting into it. The pendulum had swung so far back that I'm only now starting to get the itch again to compete. Like, so I think it's difficult to recognize the difference between just, that almost long-term fatigue from putting that much in, and especially when you actually accomplish a goal. Like if I hadn't won it, I probably would have been back on stage in 2012 or 13. But yeah, once you get that combination of an extreme amount of energy exerted, a goal accomplished, and then a practical reason to not compete for a while, yeah, I think many people would see that as, oh, I'm done. Like having my first kid. I've had a bunch of people who've had their first kid and gone retiring, and I'm thinking, how much you want to bet I'm going to get an email in 5 years when the kid's in school and they have time again,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
That's interesting.
I think too, it's you think about how hard, like he's saying, how hard a season is for somebody. Like if they have a really grueling season, and let's say it's just not the most ideal approach. I mean, I've had those myself personally. It's like you're like, I don't want to ever do this again. This is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Life sucks. This is terrible. Why would I want to put myself through this anymore? So that's like for me personally, like if I get like a first time competitor and they're on, let's say on the younger side, last thing I want to do is put this kid through the ringer. So they're making that decision. He or she's like, okay, I don't want to ever do this again. This is terrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a huge component.
I think what's interesting too is like when we say quit forever versus quit for now, like I knew, okay, I bailed out of 2015 season, right? I thought I was going to compete 2015 and I didn't. But then I remember thinking that I was supposed to compete within a couple years. Like I've always felt a pressure to, until very recently, that if I'm calling myself a figure competitor, that I can't go too many years without competing, because then I can't say that anymore. Especially being someone who built their business on being a competitor, So like other than Eric, you guys have all gone pretty close, like 2 or 3 years at the most away from the stage. But it wasn't until I'd say the last 6 months of my life where I'm comfortable being like, I don't know when I'll compete again. But it just kind of felt very, like I could see how people could be pressured into competing sooner than they probably should because they think I'm not a competitor anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I think yeah, that's something that Jeff talked about really well in his presentation in London was how your stress levels during prep can be expanded by social pressure and
Mm-hmm.
your perceptions of what people expect from you. That's true as a coach. You
Yeah.
can't show stage not lean or oh my god, I don't know how to get people lean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I think a huge part of the bodybuilding culture is having identity with the culture, and
Yeah.
a lot of people do feel like they're frauds if they don't compete anymore or whatever, or they have to. They don't want to be that guy who's back in the day, but yeah, I think a lot of it's just everything is just your mind state, and I do think there are times where yeah, you probably need to step away. Like I've definitely supported the decisions of the vast majority of people who've quit on my roster. Some people I've said, hey, just think about it, and you don't know how you feel, like especially if they're struggling with the decision, like if they're like, I'm going to retire, it's the right thing to do, but it's going to be very painful. I'm just like, well, it's all about how you think about it. Like in 10 years, it's not like you're like, it's too bad I decided to retire. I can't get back on stage,
Yeah.
But some people
There's
think
a
that
difference
way.
between someone who's 60 years old
Yeah.
and versus someone who's 30 or 35,
Yeah.
let's say. There's
Yeah.
still a lot left in the tank, in
Yeah.
the 30s.
Let's be honest. And this is actually a friend who said this to me. You don't ever need to announce a retirement from bodybuilding or powerlifting or Olympic lifting. These sports where you don't have to work up the ranks and make these qualifications, where literally you just show up, pay the entry fee, join the organization, and pay on the day of. You never need to announce retirement. You just don't compete.
Yeah.
And then if you want to compete again, you do. I think the few times you would announce a retirement might be if you were literally, in your 60s and you knew that if you took time off physically, it'll put you past a point where competing is worth it. So yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with somebody who's like, if Marshall Johnson was to make a post and say, or Dave Ricks and be like, hey, I've decided to hang up the the singlet of the posing trunks. I know that makes sense. But if I got on Facebook and I was like, I've decided to retire from the stage, it's just like, dude, like,
Why?
yeah, what do you need a hug? Do you need attention? What do
I
you
would be
want,
like, like, dude, you haven't even hit your peak yet. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And you're just gonna look like an idiot in 2 years when you decide to to unannounce you. I'm returning out of retirement at 35.
Well, that's why my ex-wife would say, again.
You're
She'd tell me
retiring
that,
again.
again, really? And she never believed me. Each time I said it, she would not believe me. She kind of believed me, though, after 2006, about, a year or two later. And I remember when I said I'm going to do it again, it was like, oh, okay, we had like an hour-long conversation about it. So, yeah.
Well, I have met people who have permanently retired. I met a guy in my first show who I know has still not gotten back on stage, and he did like 4 seasons back to back. Very burrowy,
Mm-hmm.
slaying himself for 12 to 16 weeks on the most restricted diet you can imagine, crushing it on anabolic steroids and other drugs, I would assume, and really just putting his body and his mind through the ringer. And he had a very, very hardcore mentality, and it was either I get first or I lost, kind of approach. So I could imagine, just if you could imagine just the trauma you'd experience from each one of those seasons, and then it culminating in failure each time, and eventually just being like, fuck it, it's all politics, I'm done, I'm never doing this stupid
I hate that. Oh my god, I hate that.
I'm never doing this stupid ass sport again, and when you incur that much trauma and have such a rigid mindset, yeah, I could see 5 years of that really making that an impossibility even in the future.
Yeah.
Like, why would I hit myself in the foot with a hammer again? I'm retired, I'm not doing that.
Right?
Well, and the big thing too that you said, you're like, all right, so the cost outweighs the benefit to where it's no longer worth it for these people. And like you said, I guess 100%, the cost is the cost for everybody, right? If you're going to get stage lean, the cost is the cost. Like, it sucks. Yeah. It sucks. But I guess we do, though, have control over the benefits that we get from it. And that's, I think, where the difference lies. And not we have control, like we can make ourselves love it. But if we love it, we, I think, have to train ourselves to be attached to the things that aren't so subjective.
Yeah.
Right? So, like Jeff said, loving the journey as instead of being angry that he didn't win his pro card that one time. Or...
Yeah.
I even realized this the last 3 weeks. Like 3 weeks ago, I mean, I had some life tragedy that kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things. But I'm like, shit, I was starting to have that mentality of how I used to prepare for shows about trying to improve placing and trying to maybe win, putting too much emphasis on that. Where I started realizing like, shit, I'm not even having fun here. I'm putting way too much pressure on myself. So it was making the journey itself more of a chore and a bear than it was actually having fun. I'm like, fuck, I need to let go of that. So I'm
Balance is hard.
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be like, I look at it this way: if whether I'm focusing in my mind on a daily basis that I want to, improve upon that fourth place at Worlds, or I want to try to win another pro show, I could let go of that on a daily basis and still complete my daily tasks. Like my brother says, win the day. So if I win the day, at the end when I do go get on stage, I'm gonna be competitive regardless. So that's the mindset I've like, okay, I need to change my mindset, shift it to that. So now it's like when I am doing my cardio or I am training, it's the pressure. There's no pressure, so I'm enjoying it a lot more. So I can see myself like right now looking at this season, going, yeah, I would highly doubt that I would be like saying at the end, I'm gonna retire, like this is it, unless I just absolutely look like my body just doesn't respond anymore. It's because of the mindset. But if I keep taking the mindset of like, okay, I need to, like every day, just I need to win, need to win, need to win. I need to be better, 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 better. I've done preps like that, and it's at the end, it's miserable. And when you do get that placing, like I did in 2002 when I did the Texas Shredder Classic, I took second by 1 point, and then I had that whole prep mentality was pro card. I'm winning this pro card. Like I had in my mind that I was actually going to win. So when it didn't happen, it was like someone just popped the balloon, and I went into a depression. So when I do see people like online or whatever, they're so focused and driven on placings, and when they don't, when that doesn't happen, you see the bitterness and you see the unhappiness. So for my purpose now to compete is first and foremost, yeah, I want to have fun. That's a priority now for me, and I know if I executing the way I'm supposed to be, I'm gonna have fun and I'm gonna be competitive. So it's going to be a byproduct of that, basically, of just loving the journey.
Yeah. And what's so hard, too, or I guess one of the great things about the sport, but people don't quite always get, is that other than when you're training and making your food, you can't fucking do anything else. Like, thinking about it isn't gonna... Yeah. It is different with, like, and something I love about my training right now is that there's a lot of strategy to a little bit more strategy to the training. There's a lot more the mindset you have getting through, like, this is a heavy ass set, which is cool in bodybuilding, is different than like when I have to pace myself for a certain aerobic workout. It's just different, right? But like with bodybuilding where it's like weight training or for the most part steady state cardio, like you just have to do it. And then when you're making your meals, you just have to math that out, right? You can get creative with that, but other than that, like you said, like just thinking about it in between meals while you're at work, that's just not going to do anything.
I mean, I think like when I train, I'm like, okay, today can I better, can I do one more rep or whatever? So you're still competitive with yourself. You're still trying to improve, but not to the mindset of like, okay, if I don't get third place or better over my last fourth, then the world ends. The prep was worthless.
So it's all about tricking yourself, really.
That's what I'm saying. It's like if you spend like Jeffy, you were saying, you're like, I'd be at the auto plant just thinking about this competition, like that's in 6 months, and you're like, I just gotta fucking put these parts together, bro. Like it's gonna be okay. That's when it ruins your life.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to trick yourself, and people find different ways that work for themselves. Like I've heard you both guys say different versions of your own way of doing it. Like I know, Andrea, you flip the switch and you just know when to flip it off. That's something you've said, like when to be all go hard. And I think where a lot of bodybuilders start is the switch is just flipped, and then it only turns off once they don't have the energy to actually, keep it on, and they're done. So then, I think sometimes then we have a big mindset shift, and that's where, then we find, we can't just go completely the other way, because our brain is lazy. It likes things to either be A or B, not between the two. Yeah. Like I think, I've seen Jeff, and this is not a knock, this is actually a compliment to him, shift between being very competitive to, oh, I only do this for fun kind of thing, and finding that neither one is an optimal place to be, because one is not very motivating and you can let yourself get away with stuff, and the other, on the other extreme, is will burn you out. So
Yeah.
it's not only knowing that not only having a switch that you can flip, but knowing when and for what time period. So like if you can turn it on for your workout, turn it off, and just go about your day, and same thing with when food decisions come around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then during that time cultivate a better mindset. I think where people tend to get in trouble is where something like a curveball gets thrown at them, like they get injured in the middle of the prep, or something in their life changes, and they're trying to figure out whether they should quit or not. And one option they might have never really had given themselves is to quit the prep. And I think that's a tough one for people to figure out too. Is maybe not they're retiring from bodybuilding completely, but when is it appropriate to actually say, no, I'm pulling the plug on this prep?
Yeah.
I think we've all done that. No, I've done that before it started.
Yeah.
And that was I guess I've talked about mine on this podcast a few times, but it was a week before that. So I was dieting before the diet, had a little break, and was about to do the big diet. And mine was because I just had an epiphany that I was going to be around my family for the first time in a few years. And that I was like, oh shit, I've been crazy as fuck every time they've seen me. And now I'm coming home having lived in California for a few years, and I should probably not arrive at my Mexican family and tell them they can't feed me. Like, it's mean for them, you know what I mean? And it had been so long. And so like that was the first time that I ever felt guilty. Whereas the 5 years before, it was like, well, they just have to deal with it. So you know what I mean? So it was like, I hadn't had those feelings before for the last few years. Ever since I discovered bodybuilding, I'd never even thought about other people until that. And I think it took me being away from them, and missing them, and then seeing them again and being like, oh shit, like, I'm so sorry for the last few years. And then, because I hadn't felt that before, I then started using my education, was like, oh, I also look the same. Also haven't really made much progress. It would be another 6 months of me looking very marginally better, if at all, if I got on stage again. And then it was like, okay, now this all collectively makes sense that I should probably like eat and grow for a little bit, because I've never done it. But it was first like that one emotional thing that had to make all the things that I knew in my brain, like education wise, years before, but I couldn't make sense of it because I still internally, emotionally wanted the stage so bad. Like my emotions took over my education, or my fucking common sense, really.
Yeah, I can relate to that. It's just in different ways. Like 2009, I thought I was relatively balanced and compared to most, and I probably was objectively, but
Yeah.
I unless something physically prevented me from getting on stage, I was not going to stop.
Right.
Like people don't know this. I don't share this very much, but I did a powerlifting meet the day after my dad died.
Yeah.
Like literally 24 hours later. And then when I tore my hamstring, that was the first time I actually thought maybe I can't keep competing this year. It was the same year. And that was actually very hard to take, because all of a sudden the control was out of my hands. I didn't have the power. I didn't get to decide. The light got switched off, like
for you.
Right. And I think looking back on it now, I realize how unbalanced I actually was, or how much I didn't have the ability to turn off some switches. Like once I had decided I'm going to get on stage, I would have had to get hit by a bus, for that not to happen, and that's probably not a good mentality. But at the same time, that was how I knew to stay motivated, as to there was not an option not to do what I had set forth. And, I could auto-regulate or be more balanced within the context. I'm definitely going to get on stage no matter what. But once I get outside of that, I was very kind of lost. And I'm not sure I would tell a client right now who messaged me and said, hey, my pops just died, I've got a meet tomorrow. I'd be like, dude, you sure you want to do that? Or, I've got a show in 3 weeks. I just got a hamstring tear. I'd be like, can we just push it back to your one in June?
Yeah.
Right.
But so yeah, I think that's that's a very difficult thing for most competitors. Even when they learn to trick themselves, they don't necessarily have the skills to deal with curveballs that get thrown, and that's when I typically see competitors really have a rough time, is when life happens in the middle of prep. It's something outside of their control.
Yeah. Jeff, when did you bail out of a prep, and what for?
2000. It was after. Well, I did one show. No, I did two. I did two shows, and I was supposed to do a third one. But what happened was, after the second show, I ate too much, so I gained. That
is not what I was expecting.
So.
You had a career,
but this was 16 years ago. So yeah. I gained maybe 10 pounds. So it wasn't like 20 pounds or anything. Like,
it was a normal after season amount, but you were still in season. Yeah.
So I took a few days off, and stopped cardio, stopped training, eating. Then it's like, okay, let's get back on this. But my body wasn't responding like it was prior.
Yeah.
So I got back on the same protocols, doing all the cardio and all that, and nothing was happening. And my body it wasn't responding. Just visually, it wasn't responding either. It looked actually worse. I mean, obviously, you're going to look worse 10 pounds heavier, but it was like a flat, just not a good look. So after about 3 or 4 weeks of that, trying to get myself back, I was just like, it's depressing, And I was going to be trying to go for a pro card like that, and I'm like, shut it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something.
I think my body was tired, I think, at that point, because the way I was prepping is nothing like, we do nowadays. So I think my body was just done at that point. Tired body, tired mind, too much body fat. Yeah.
I forget too, the way I ended my 2013 season, I didn't quit, but I wanted to do 3 shows. I had done 2. My third one was scheduled in 6 weeks is what I thought I was going to do. And it was after the second one, it was something similar. It was the first 2/3 of prep, I was looking better week after week, competed, got back into this, and I was like, now I'm not sleeping anymore. I would start to sleep every 2 or 3 times a day for 3 or 4 hours. I was sleeping. I wasn't actually, and it was catching up to me. I was stressed out, and I was the last 3 or 4 weeks, I was looking shittier and just smaller. Not better, but now you're just getting skinny. This isn't, But more importantly, I remember in one of my check-ins to Bert, I was crying. I was like, I can't sleep. I don't know what to do. When I need to sleep, it would hit me. It's I need a nap now. And then 3 hours later, I'd be like, oh my God, why? So my body was just aborting in all kinds of ways. And instead of, I knew I couldn't make the 6 weeks, so I found a show that weekend in SoCal, and so we made the trip so that I could get on stage one more time. And I did look better the second show than the third, even though it was 3 or 4 weeks later. But it was the opposite of what everyone tells you. Pick another show. I was no, if I don't compete now, I won't do it again this year, because I know that nothing better is going to come from this. And it was a Wednesday, and then I competed Saturday, and then I was I'm just done. So I guess that's a good point too, right? Sometimes your body is nah, bro, we're done.
I think
we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's they typically go hand in hand too.
Yeah.
I can tell the amount that I try to, or clients as well, myself or clients, try to work around the rules that they set up to motivate themselves once they're given the opportunity. That tells you something. So for example, my first season, I was I'm going to get on stage because I want to become a competitive bodybuilder, right? And I pushed myself so hard. And I originally had the plan of doing 3 shows. And just like you, I did the first show, and I was like, I'm done. I ate a bunch of food, and then I saw the pictures, and I was so displeased with the way I looked that I got it together. But I was like, there's no way I can make it to the next show a month or 2 months from now. So I found an NPC show, and literally 4 days later, and I just depleted myself, got on stage, peaked better, did my color right, posed better, and those are the pictures you can find in my 2007 season. But I had no energy to keep going in another week, so I basically binged for 3 days and then dieted for 4 and got back on stage. But because in my mind that the the allowable parameters for Eric was you must get on stage to become a bodybuilder. As soon as I did that, I wasn't like, yeah, that was great, I want to do a few more shows while we're lean. It was like, okay, good, thank God I fixed it. Now I can let go of my rules, you know.
Yeah.
And just the same thing with the amount of calories that people eat post show. It's like you have this one day where you're allowed to not track, and an inverse amount of psychological trauma you took is going to be related to the calories, you know. So even though it might not serve your long term goal to eat 10,000 calories versus 6, it's probably going to be the same positive effect and just 4,000 calories of negative effect after that, So
that's a good point. So other than quitting overall as a career, we talked about quitting your season. What about, would you be cool if we ended with like when you should probably like not go to the gym today, or maybe you should have a diet break now, or things like that.
Yeah, that's a good topic.
Yeah.
The diet break one is tough to do with yourself, but it's easier for me to do now as a coach. Like, I just think of how far out are they, and then if we have the time and they're starting to struggle, now almost my knee-jerk reaction is let's diet break,
Yeah.
Unless they're being like complete like wuss, like you really don't get it, like here's what you need to do. That's actually one more thing. I have pulled the plug on clients. That's actually one thing I haven't shared. I've had people who said they want to do a show and then are completely non-committed with their diet. Unrealistic expectations of what the work, that amount that they have to put in, can't stick to the diet. Even like we're talking like week 3 and they're 40 over and they went out to eat and didn't track even. And I eventually go, look, you're just not ready to be a competitive bodybuilder yet. This is not going to go well. You're going to end up quote unquote dieting for 2 years and not looking the part. And I've told people I won't keep coaching you. I want you to take an off season. I want you to get a healthy relationship with food. I'll help you with that, but I'm not going to diet you for a prep. I've done that actually a couple times.
Yeah. And I think where people get sneaky about this, and I realize relative to you guys, I'm a new coach, but it's like, all right, we've started prep. Yeah, it might be 8 months away. I need you to be within 5 grams on your macros. And like 2-3 times a week, they're like 15 or 20, and it's like, okay, but that's not what we're doing. And they think that it's because it's so much better than what they were doing before, but it's still like 80 to 85% isn't 100 or 95. Like it, and they think it doesn't matter that much. Or, messing up 2 days a month. It's like, no, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal. Like, that's not going to work.
There's also more context to that, too. Because let's say you have if there's a ton of context with that, because if you have a veteran athlete, they're 8 months out and they're like, can have 1 or 2 beers a week. They know how to make that work.
That's different.
Whereas a guy who's just signed up for his very first show and like, can I have 1 or 2 beers? Like that's like 2 different worlds right there.
Yeah.
So for me, what I've been doing lately is that I just on an individual basis and see what that context is with that person. Some people you kind of have to put the hammer down. Some people you go, okay, right now, you're a veteran, we're 8 months out. You want your 1 or 2 beers, we'll make it work. But at some point, we're going to have to say, okay, you got to know when to turn it off. And
well, the difference, I think, is that the veteran knows that needs to be accounted for somewhere. The new person, even if they understand that, they don't know how to do that. They're not good at tracking anyway, or eyeballing food. So, I tend to agree with Andrea. If I've got a first-time competitor, first couple weeks, if you're off by 20, then that's what we're going to work on getting better at. But if I've got just like a second season competitor who knows what's up, is trying to improve their condition, and is like at 80% on week 3, just because then we're going to have a serious conversation. If I've got a vet who's doing that and then tells me, and so what I did was the next day I cut my calories down by 100, and the next 2 days I did 50 calories less, then I'm probably going to be like, sweet, as long as our weight loss is hitting it the way we need to. You know what it takes, you know what you need to do. So.
Yeah. Like I have one guy right now, we're working worlds, and the worlds is what, like 3 weeks away? And yeah, he's like, okay, 20 grams shorter than this, I'll make up for it tomorrow. But I'm like, no, dude, this is it. This is the championship rounds. Like you're in the 10th round of a championship fight. These next 3 weeks are like, this is make or break. You don't want no regrets at the end. So it's like, to me, it's like making sure that that person's setting up their daily flow to where it's like so consistent. Like it's just money every day. One thing you're going to control, but you're going to control a lot of variables that way. Everything's going to be nice and consistent. It's easier to interpret data that way. It's easier to interpret the way they're looking on a day-to-day basis. So if things are like this, even if they're like making these, if they're withdrawing this day but they're depositing it back the next day, it's not going to be like as consistent as it would be. So to me, it's like the word that I've been using a lot lately is setting up a nice flow, a daily flow. Mm-hmm. So just it could be 8 months out. If you're like this, it's still hard to interpret data.
Yeah.
Your own personal data. So to me, it's like setting up your daily flow is so important. That's going to look different for a lot of different people. But that's something I've done personally for myself, even though I'm like, 7, 8, 9 months away from a stage. I'm like, okay, I need to just get myself into a rhythm.
Yeah.
And execute it. And that's basically what I've been doing the last 3 weeks. And like visually, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is making sense now. I'm starting to see things.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to, or something that I've found that I didn't think was going to be as common as it is, I guess, or tell me if I'm wrong, but there's people that IFYM's like cool and trendy, and it just happened in the last 5 years, right? So I have these people sometimes that they say 3 to 5 years ago, a couple years ago, whatever, did a very bro 12-week prep, got on stage for the first time, and were like, okay, I can do this. Got out of hand afterwards, because those kind of preps cause people to get out of hand afterwards and gain all this weight. And then they hear about 3D or intelligent sort of flexible dieting principles, and they come to us thinking that this is going to be easy now, and they have all this flexibility. Has that ever happened to y'all a few times?
Hundreds of times. Yeah.
Like they come to us and they're like, oh, there's this flexible way to do it. So I'll just try like they think it's going to be this like golden era of like painless bodybuilding.
Yeah, and I can understand that mentality, because the way they did it before was so hard. They might have wanted to quit rather than doing it continually. So they probably put this up on a pedestal. And
yeah,
it's certainly easier, but it's nothing for getting on stage in bodybuilding is easy, so.
Yeah. Anyways, so I've had people on my roster where, because they were on strict meal plan, lost their physique completely after that, come back thinking that it's going to be just that errors are small and that they don't matter so much. And then now, after trying to clean that up for a while, it's like, okay, now we can't do the season. Let's try for next year.
It all comes down to accountability.
Yeah.
You still have to have discipline, even though you have more food variety and flexibility. Yeah. Maybe meal time is not as stringent and things like that. You still have to have accountability. And
yeah,
that's the thing when I work. I can tell you this: over the last 6 or 7 years, the athletes or the people I've worked with that have adhered more to protocol versus the ones that I can get away with things here and there, they're the ones that make the most progress. I mean, I can even say that with myself. Yeah. I could look at my spreadsheet now and I say, okay, here's some holes here and there with like, okay, on the weekends I'm not tracking or whatever. And then on the parts of the spreadsheet where like everything's accounted for, there's more progress.
Yep.
I mean, that's the bottom line.
And then when people are like, well, I went out, but I accounted for it, but I weighed more the next day. Just things like that. It's so small.
Yeah. If I'm hiring a coach and I'm paying good money for a coach, I mean, to me, it's like, why spend money on a coach if you're not going to hold yourself accountable and do the things you're supposed to do? And also, too, it's like, in a sense, you're kind of that coach's reputation as well. It's like they want to do good by you, too. So their job is to make sure they're providing the coaching and the protocols, but you also have to do your part too.
And to relate that back to the topic of quitting, it's like the people who think they're making it easier on themselves by being more lackadaisical or trying to get away with stuff in the beginning, they end up making it harder on themselves. And more often, it's those people with that mentality that end up having to quit on a season, And then in the end, if they're honest with themselves, they have to realize, well, this was because of all the decisions I continually made, I wasn't actually committed, so I had to quit. It's kind of a self-fulfilling reverse prophecy, I want to make this easy.
Your daily flow choices, the choices you make in any given moment could definitely affect the end product in either a positive or a negative way. Yeah. So you may think like, I'll just eat my slice of pizza here and I'll make up for it tomorrow. I mean, if you do that, let's say 10, 20 times over the course of a 6-month prep, that might be, all it takes for you to not hit your conditioning right.
When do y'all think, and this goes back to like how we were just talking about nutritionally, right? People halfway going there and like taking it a little easy ends up costing them big time. I think, Jeff, you're like the master at how to manipulate your training in a way that is going to allow you to be more successful in prep. And by manipulating your training, it's like moving days, leaving early, cutting things short, adding when you can, all that stuff. When are days that you go into the gym and come out? Or when are days that you move your sessions? Like, what are the occasions in which you feel like that's okay and beneficial?
I don't think it's okay if you're lazy or you feel like you're tired. Right. I want to start with that because I don't want that to be like misinterpreted. So it's like intelligent. If you're just feeling like, I feel tired, and you're being a little lazy, no, you need to get in there and get after it. But if you're legitimately, let's say you're just really run down and drained, then I'll say, okay, I'm probably going to get a better workout tomorrow than I will today. So I'll perform better, and then I'll probably recover better too because I'm not as taxed. It could be like, for me personally, like if let's say there was something that happened during the day that's super stressful, or I've had those days where I was like dealing with like life stress, like just like a big life event, I'll skip that day because I know from experience that when I'm in a high stress state like that, I don't perform well. I have bad workouts. I'm more susceptible to injury like that. I've actually started workouts where like my first set or two and just felt awful. I'm like, okay, this is not going to go well. So I'll just stop, walk out. I'll go back tomorrow when I'm fresh. The times that I didn't do that, like where I just like, you know what? Don't be a pussy. Just keep going. That's when I tore my calf.
Yeah.
So it's like I didn't know how to do that though in the beginning. Like someone who in their first year of training, maybe it's like hard to understand how to figure that out. But it's just taken me over, the course of time to get to know myself a lot more and understand when I can and can't do these things. Like recently, I just went from a 4-day split to a 3-day split just because I had a big life event tragedy that happened. I had a lower back injury, and I'm dieting. So I'm like, okay, I need a little bit more recovery here. And yeah, it's working. I'm like, okay, I'm performing better. I'm feeling a lot better. My mindset, I'm happier all around. So I know probably in the next week or two, I'll probably slowly, turn that dimmer switch up and probably throw that 4th day back in there cautiously. So just kind of knowing, these.
And another thing too, I think that goes into that context is you lift heavy as shit. Whereas like someone who's new, who just started lifting in the first 1 to 3 years is very far from their genetic potential. There's almost nothing they're going to do in the gym that they couldn't do just because they were tired.
Yeah. If they're training intelligently, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, for those people who are getting pretty strong, have been training for a while, but don't have Jeff's level of experience, I think it's probably smart to take some more systematic approaches because you just don't have the ability like Jeff does to auto-regulate like that. Like, so some of the things I do with my clients is I'll have them, that they know which days are their hard, medium, and light days. They know that from how they feel. And I'll give them a list of accessories, and I won't give them specific days they have to train on. I'll be like day 1 through 4, right? Not Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or something like that.
Right.
And then they know that if they come in on Monday and they feel like absolute crap, everything can get shifted back a day. That's fine,
Mm-hmm.
Or they can even take that that volume day later in the week or an easier day later in the week and put it on that day if they're feeling just kind of so long as they get it in the other day.
Right.
So I kind of give them that same kind of, pyramid structure in their head that I give for the nutrition pyramid. It's like, well, just look at total volume in the week as our primary total goal. So you can do things like, right, I really don't think I can do 5 reps with that today. It feels like I'd be pushing really close to like a 10 RPE and risking injury or missing a rep or, getting a bad spot. Okay, well, don't do 3x5, do 5x3 with the same weight. That's like giving your client or yourself those options. It allows you to kind of get out of that very limited mentality you might have of either I do what's written or I'm a bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
If it changes to I get all my volume in the week on a bitch, and that gives you a lot more flexibility.
Because on day 8, you're a bitch either way. I'm just kidding.
Correct. Yeah.
No. Another thing, or a lot of people who are especially newer to the sport, I feel like, including myself, want to train like 6 days a week because that's the most we'll allow kind of thing, So I have a lot of people on 6-day-a-week programs, and they'll like email me and like apologize if they had to miss a day or whatever. I'm like, as long as you get 4 and once a month, that's okay. So like if it's a 6-day-a-week program and they're allowed to miss up to 2 at least 1 week a month kind of thing. Like I keep it super broad, but those people generally will go to the gym and perform poorly or before they would skip a day. But anyways, I think what we need to illustrate is that there's a lot of ways to manipulate it in any way.
I totally agree.
Days, volume, checklists, Jeff changing your entire frequency.
Options.
Yeah. Okay. Well, did we miss anything as far as quitting? Basically, everyone should quit at some point. That's what we said?
Yeah.
Okay.
I quit.
Just quit now.
Just quit the podcast.
We're about to quit right now.
Yeah, let's quit this episode right now. Thank you guys for sticking around. Talk to y'all next time. See ya.
For sure.